Hi, I'm Sharon Palmer, and today we will be diving in on a contemporary topic related to virtual teams. While we normally try to focus on the positive sides only, this presentation will focus on the challenges within virtual teams. The intent of this presentation is to cover the path to understanding to improve the virtual team and organization. The current research on this topic will be used to uncover the benefits, challenges, and moving forward. We will also be applying a biblical principle to the lessons learned during this presentation. Our content includes defining a virtual organization, the benefits or positive side of a virtual team, identifying and acknowledging the issues, determining the needs of the team and the individual, the biblical perspective, and summary of the information. So let's start with figuring out what virtuality or a virtual organization is. In order to understand the challenges of a virtual team, you have to understand what virtuality or a virtual organization is. The formal dictionary definitions include an essence or potential existence. In computing, it means not physically existing as such, but made by software to appear to do so. When I look at these various definitions to include it describing a network of independent firms that join together, sometimes temporarily, to produce a service or a product, I often think about my own experience working in a virtual team. And my short-term definition for a virtual team or virtuality is together while apart. We've been forced quite quickly into a more virtual situations than in previous years, but it's also given us the opportunity to learn, grow, and adapt to these new situations. A virtual team or organization is made up of employees in many different geographical locations, separated but working together towards a common goal for the organization. So before we get into the challenges of a virtual team, I think it's important that we start with looking at the benefits. Some of the first positive aspects or benefits that come to mind are reduced costs, work-life balance, and increase of diverse recruitment. Each of these can be found in current research as points of interest related to the virtual organization, especially as companies and teams are looking at long-term solutions. When we think about reduced costs, we aren't just thinking of printer paper. This can be applied to recruitment, such as scheduling interviews, or leases on buildings, commuting, and even time costs, such as quickly messaging someone to collaborate instead of walking around an office looking for them. Work-life balance is also seen as a positive for many because employees are sometimes able to manage childcare, have more time at home, sometimes more autonomy with their work. And in a virtual team or organization, recruitment efforts can look at wider areas across the United States or even across the globe, looking for more qualified talent, which is likely to increase diversity. Each of these three are relative to the individual and the organization, but are often the first things that come to mind when looking at the benefits or positive aspects of a virtual team. If you work in a virtual team, I invite you to think about some of the positives that have come for you for working remotely. As we move closer to the challenges of a virtual team, there are some considerations to observe. I think it's important to take a step back and ask some questions when looking at both the benefits and the challenges of a virtual team. Often it's not so black and white. These three questions can be used to dive further into the unknowns while looking for ways to improve the virtual organization experience. So, is this virtual organization or team permanent or temporary? Sometimes that comes into play when you're looking at what benefits to offer the team, what resources do they need. Is the organization or team entirely or partially remote? This comes into play when you're looking at the challenges. Is there going to be an issue with having some people in the office or some people working remotely? Does the size of the organization or team impact those potential challenges? When we're looking at the size, you want to consider a really large organization going virtual may hinder some of the communication capabilities. And with a small team, while you may have good communication, there may be other challenges. So these three things are important to consider when looking at the positives, but also acknowledging the challenges. This slide will be the bread and butter of our content, the challenges of virtual teams. We will spend a bit more time here on this slide going through each possible issue listed. There are several possible issues to be considered when working with or in a virtual team. Due to the quote, absent but together aspect, many things that come more naturally or easier in a together type situation take a little bit more effort and thought. In the first column, I've laid out several challenges, and in the second column, I've asked questions related to those challenges. So the first one is accountability and trust. In a virtual team, everyone has a role, and you're relying on your team members to get the job done in a less structured way. And what I mean by that is, more distractions, more autonomy. There's a lot of possibilities there. Content sharing, information sharing across a virtual setting has been found to be a current challenge in the virtual team. We have many platforms to transfer, connect, or share that information, but the team really has to determine the most effective way of doing so. Measurement of performance. While the main parts of a team or individual's job may not have changed, how the tasks get accomplished or measured may. So, how do you measure performance in a virtual setting? Are there issues with deviance? We really can no longer look at performance and measurement of performance the same as working in a traditional in-office setting. This can cause some challenges with new or established teams as well. Internet capabilities and access. Though it seems trivial, this is a top challenge that really needs to be accounted for. If the organization or team stays virtual in short term or long term, it really needs to be considered that not all geographical areas have the same internet capabilities, or that not all employees have the same access. This can cause added financial burden or even decreased productivity to some or all of the virtual team members. So some questions to ask include, is the employee's internet reliable? Who's responsible for those costs? Say that employee has to get Wi-Fi the first time or has to increase the type of Wi-Fi that they get. And then also, is there a plan for internet outage in a virtual team? Now, some organizations still have their physical offices they may be able to come to, but what if that's not the case? How can the team still be successful if there is an issue with internet that is highly reliant on, completing tasks? Social interactions. We've seen the impact that being physically separated from other people can have on the individual and the team. So, social interactions of any kind are important for collaboration, communication, and human connection, and these can increase productivity and even mental health. So, how can an organization acknowledge and address that this is important? Is there consistent encouragement or engagement of the team? And what about tools and resources? Are they being provided to increase that success? And lastly, communication. It correlates to each of these other challenges that were mentioned. There is a difference between accessibility and communication. Sometimes having to stay green or online all of the time can actually increase the stress of constantly being available or connected. Some individuals have a hard time separating that home and work life because they are so easily accessible via phone, text, email, IM, or other. But being accessible doesn't mean good communication. It's important that while physically separated, virtual teams and organizations continue to create clear, specific, and actionable communication when collaborating, measuring performance, or trusting each other with tasks. Overall, while there are many positives to virtuality, there also are challenges that need to be addressed and questioned at each step of the way in order to overcome them or move past or create positive change. The questions posed to each of these challenges may help the team move forward into a more connected and effective virtual team. So, how can a biblical principle be applied to virtuality, which is a fairly new concept? Let's find out on the next slide. While there isn't anything specific in the Bible about the virtual aspect of teams, we can absolutely find and apply multiple biblical principles to the individual and the team. Pulling from our list of challenges, we can see how work ethic can be tied to the scripture regarding honesty, trustworthiness, skillfulness, and performance, just to name a few. We know that Proverbs is littered with applications such as being slack of the hand, causing poverty, or references to the soul of the sluggard and the one who works being able to provide. But above all else, in Proverbs 13:4, as Christians, we are to do all to the glory of God. So when we're faced with these challenges of a virtual world, we have to remember that even if our boss or our coworkers can't physically see us working, it's our responsibility as Christians to do honest work and for His glory, not man. For communication, it's also a consistent theme in the Bible. We know that the how, the what, and the why as we communicate are important aspects of effective teams and success. So, to name a few, Colossians and James remind us that our conversations should be filled with grace and knowledge, and that we should be slow to speak and quick to listen. In a virtual world, it's easy for information to get lost in translation or even missed. But importantly, we're reminded in Proverbs 18:21 that the tongue has the power of life and death. We have to be consciously aware of our thoughts and the words of our mouth. And lastly, the impact of diverse groups in a virtual setting. As Christians, we know that we were created in God's image and created each with different talents, skills, and gifts. So the ultimate purpose in life is to live for His glory. But in a virtual team setting, the uniqueness that we all have can create a wonderful world, much like the body as mentioned in 1 Corinthians, which we're going to read on the next slide. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as He wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. 1 Corinthians 12:17 through 20, New International Version. Though geographically separated, the importance and significance of a diverse team can be found in this verse. Each part, each role, each person coming together to collaborate, share ideas, different perspectives, and even go through challenges together. It all plays a part in the success of a virtual team. In summary, we briefly defined and explained what a virtual team organization was, the together but apart theory. We examined some of the positive parts of the virtual team, such as areas of cost reduction, increased work-life balance opportunities, and the potential for improved diverse candidate recruiting. Before we move to the challenges, we expressed some considerations about how certain aspects of the virtual team, such as size, geographical locations, and length of virtual workforce, can influence those challenges. We finally discussed some of the important challenges that virtual teams can or might face. These included accountability, performance measurement, internet considerations, social interactions, and communication issues. And lastly, we applied several biblical principles to the aspect of team and individual work ethics, communications, and the importance of diverse work groups. Moving forward, I hope that we can learn to accept, challenge, and learn from the current issues within virtual teams to work towards a positive change. Technology has significantly changed the way we work, and there are no signs of it stopping now. If you would like to look further into the information provided today, this slide and the next are references that were utilized. I appreciate your time and consideration for listening today as we discussed current research and concepts on challenges of virtual organizations.